Hi again, everyone. I'm Ollie Matthews. This is the Narcissistic Resistance. We all know the narcissist is completely full of shit. And as much as we think we've figured them out and we know where they're coming from, we don't. You just keep, as things keep happening, you keep turning over these rocks and putting these pieces together. And I've talked about my grandfather, I've talked about my father, I've talked about that side of the family, I've talked about the entire relationship. I've given, you know, the stories of the cult like behavior and my father's cult like dedication to these people. But since realizing my grandfather died, and, you know, like I said, a lot of things have been going through my mind about, you know, about basically just being written off. Not that I have no part in that choice, I obviously do. But in that, there it is, all I got left is, it's me and Charlene and these cats and that turtle, and that's about it. And basically everybody on this channel. So you face that, and you come to these realizations, and that it's basically you against the world, and that's okay. And these thoughts pop in your head where you're replaying your history, and I was been replaying the history of myself and my father, my grandfather, and even my brother to some extent. Now, I talked about how my father came into my house, went into my brother's house, did this thing where he called us pieces of shit and blew up, and this whole thing. He did it to me in my house in Woodridge. He did it to my brother out in Denver. It's what he does. And in the course of remembering things, I go back and I remember, and I've talked about this, about one of the times where my father and I went to therapy together. My therapist, which was their therapist. And this was like the first or second time when my ex-wife was pregnant with Aaron, when this was going on over the baby furniture. And that was, what set it off is when my father had showed up early in the morning when I told him not to, started making noise, just so he wanted to show me up in my own house. And he told me in that meeting with Maureen that I should just take it because that's what his father did to him when he was out of a job for a year when I was first born, when I was a year old, and my mother was basically carrying the weight. And I've talked about this, how my mother took on the house, the mortgage, 2 car payments, insurance, everything, working on a waitress's salary. I've talked about that. But apparently my grandfather showed up at the house, told my father what a giant piece of shit he is, even though he couldn't find work. Yada, yada, yada. And I should have to accept that because that's what you do for your father, because it's your father. And me and Maureen at the same time were like, no, no, that's not what you do for your father. Somebody's having a coughing fit. He had no right to come into your home as an adult and talk to you like that. None whatsoever. And he tried to like backpedal and make it seem like it wasn't that. Oh no, that, and then that's when all of a sudden he drops that my cousin Mark had diabetes and starts crying. And in my fucked up head right there and then I'm thinking somehow I gave Mark diabetes. But I've talked about that. That's not the point of this video. So he says he sat there and just took it from his father at, if I was a year old, I guess he was 24, 25 at the time. They got married young. They were idiots. Idiots. And mind you, my grandfather had a factory that he wouldn't hire my father to work at. Now, why is that important, and where does that lead to how the narcissist is always full of shit? Well, shit, Ollie, we know your father's a piece of shit. We know he's full of shit. We've seen it ourselves in the comments. People, we got it, but how deep of a piece of shit is he? How full of shit is he? Well, I'm going to tell you. And for the life of me, I can't remember if I've ever mentioned this or not before on here. But my father used to boast and tell this story how, you know, when he was growing up, what a son of a bitch his father was, always beating him and his brother and his older sisters, and everybody was getting beaten, and he got the worst of it, and he goes, he was the oldest, and on and on and on and on and on. And that was his whole fucking childhood. Yada, 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 yada. Okay, cool. Then when he was 17 years old, he was in a car accident, and he was eating dinner, and he said something at the dinner table that his father didn't like, and he had been in a car accident, and he said his head was wrapped. He said his father hit him in the head, and the thing moved, and he got up, goes up the stairs, storming up the stairs. Well, his father wasn't going to have that, slams down his napkin, goes, chases my father up the stairs. My father said he turned around to my grandfather and pointed at him. And he said, if you come up to the top of these stairs, you better be willing to go back down them. And he said my grandfather just turned around and walked away. Huh. Okay. So, what's the point? I mean, you've talked about Ollie getting violent and having the fight. I'm like, you know, for years I believed that story. Years I believed it up until I never really gave it much other thought. You know, other than because it, you know, was so ingrained into me growing up, and I never put it into context of the relationship with his father as a whole. Now, mind you, from the last video I did about this, other than him talking about his childhood in the house, never in front of anybody, never in front of his own family, other than him talking about that in our house, to me only, and my brother, he never uttered a bad word about his father or anybody in his entire family, and I've said that, other than his sister. Okay. So you mean to tell me this guy who's going to stand up to his father at 17 is going to let the same guy walk into his house and call him a sack of shit? Furthermore, His father, after being told and being put in his place after all those years, is going to have the balls to come to your house and talk to you like that. Something doesn't add up. And what doesn't add up, Brian, is that your story of you ever standing up for yourself to your father or anybody in your family. You coward. Yet, you decided to go and recreate the same scenario. And I know the thing with your father in your house is true because your drunk wife verifies it. She told me. He always thought you were a piece of shit. Thought you were a lazy bum. Knew it, in fact. That's why he went to the house, because he knew what a sack of shit you were. Knew it. Wouldn't give you a job, other than maybe sweep up. Right? Right. Yet you were going to come to my house, and even Precious's, believe it or not, and do the same thing. Try to project the same thing your father did to you onto me and onto your other son as well, as sad as that is. I guess it was my fight you didn't like. I mean, besides the fact I look nothing like you or anybody in the family, and the other one does, so that probably made it easier for you as well. You're a coward. Your entire life, you've been a coward. And you go making up stories to children to what? To control them? To make them think that you've stood up for somebody? Stood up for yourself and you never did? All you've done is continue bullying. You're a child up here. You'll always be a child up here. That's where you are. That's why you do what you do. And you made up these stories about your father, but yet you never said a bad word about anybody in your family. Yet you felt enough courage to stand up to him and tell him you were going to toss him down a flight of stairs or whatever you put it. But you're going to let him come into your house and tell you off in front of your wife and child? Really? Really? Maybe that's where all that other passive aggressive, all that, not even just aggressiveness to get your way with other people comes from. That explosive anger, that need to get in people's faces, that need to make an asshole out of yourself because of the one person you needed to stand up to and just couldn't or wouldn't, because you're a coward. And your father died knowing you're a coward. That's the reality of it. Knows you're a coward. You stood up and you were thrown down. Get the hell out. It don't add up. Don't add up. And I went 44 years, or however many years you've been telling it to me. 40 years. Never really even giving it a second thought. Why? Because it was so easy for me to stand up to you. My problem was never standing up to my fans. Was never standing up to them or fighting them. It was fighting them to the point where I didn't lose my fucking mind, where I didn't sound like a stark raving lunatic as they start laughing and making fun of you and pointing at you. We all know the gaslighting routine. But now I really understand where it's coming from. with you. Oh, God. It's going to be worse. It's just going to be worse for you as a kid. Because now that he's gone and she's gone, and your mom and your dad are gone, this is when it gets really fucking bad. This is going to get really bad for you. And you got a lot of years of suffering based on how long your father lived and his father lived and his brother lived. I mean, let's face it. I mean, the way your wife drinks, who knows? Who knows when her liver's just going to be like, fuck this. I can't take this shit anymore. They usually go pretty quick on that side of the family. Like that. Your side is much more longer and drawn out. And that's why you resented me. It's because at an early age, I had the balls you don't have. You didn't have into your 70s. Yet I had it as a child. But you had to destroy it. Gotcha. Gotcha. That's how that works, people. The longer you keep these people out of your life, the more and more clarity you're going to gain, and the more and more understanding of your abuser you're going to gain. And right now, this takes so much away from him. So much. I mean, I've called you weak, I've called you feckless before, but wow. Wow. You could have stood up for yourself at least once. You could have stood up to that guy one time. One time. And then you would know what it was like to be a man. One time. And you wouldn't have to bully your own children. To pacify, to placate your own hurt feelings. You gotta understand, the narcissist is always gonna project it back on you. It comes from somewhere with these people. It comes from somewhere, and that's how you know it's purposeful. There's a reason behind it. There is a reason. Sometimes I say there is no reason. There's always a reason. The reason is usually just so sick and so cruel and so self-serving and serves no other purpose than just to make them feel good in the moment. I am fortunate. I am fortunate. I am as normal as I am, being raised by what I was raised by. And I will say this. This channel and these people here are the only family I'm going to need. Period. Because when I really needed help, or when things are down, these are the people who come and boost it up. Do the job that you never would. No strings attached. No nothing attached. That's what family does. Maybe if you could have stood up for yourself one time in your life, you'd understand that. I think not, though. Thank you to everybody watching. Let me know what you think in the comments section below. If you want to be a part of the channel, part of the resistance, you guys know what to do by now with the links and the PayPal and the email. See you all soon, everybody. Bye.